When we think about the term surrender, what does that really mean? In most cultures, it's usually equated with giving up, allowing oneself to be dominated, essentially demonstrating weakness. Now, at first glance, it appears to be the very opposite of heroics, and we all love the hero, and at best distance ourselves from the loser, the one who surrenders. Now, there's another side to surrender that can be far more empowering and transformative than even the greatest feats of heroics. And opening yourself up to this shift in how you look at and utilize surrender in your life can make the difference between living a life based on fear or one full of self-expression and unimagined possibilities. Now, there's a big distinction between giving up and acceptance of what is. Giving up implies a hopelessness, resignation, and a sense of being powerless. Acceptance of what is often the threshold to the doorway of possibilities you can't even imagine. Acceptance of what is reflects a much more empowering form of surrender. When you accept and surrender to what is, you are no longer fighting the reality of the isness, which frees you up to explore, discover, and experience other possibilities. Several years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, given that 5 other members of my immediate family have perished from various forms of cancer, this was not to be taken lightly. Despite the encouraging biopsy results that indicated a mild case, I chose to listen to my intuition rather than the doctors and insisted that they remove my prostate immediately. And it's a good thing they did, because the post-surgery tissue studies showed that the cancer was extremely aggressive. So aggressive, in fact, that they had to do follow-up intensive daily radiation for 7 weeks. As a result of all these treatments, I was rendered clinically impotent. And for many men, this is considered a fate worse than death. I fought this reality with everything I had, especially considering I had just ended a 26-year marriage where the last 11 years were celibate. So when I finally met the love of my life a year later, and it became clear we were going to be more than just, well, hiking buddies, I was still determined to, quote-unquote, make things work like they used to. My partner is an incredibly beautiful and conscious woman who had never been with a man impacted by erectile dysfunction before. And her adventurous spirit made her open to exploring what might be possible in the intimacy department. Neither of us really knew what it meant to explore other ways of being intimate, but we were more than willing to find out. Now, we wanted to make our first intimate time together very special. So I booked a night at a natural hot springs resort about 100 miles north of where we live in Santa Barbara. Upon arrival, we were greeted with an incredible suite that had the biggest and highest 4-poster bed I had ever seen, a fireplace, and our own private natural hot springs tub on the adjoining deck. Our jaws hung in awe as we took in this incredibly romantic setting. Now, I still hadn't given up the notion of having intercourse with this beautiful, sexy, wonderful woman. And to demonstrate my commitment to that end, I brought the full complement of erectile aids available. Now, this included the highest dose of Cialis you can buy and a powerful drug called Muse, which is so strong that if a normally functioning man were foolish enough to try it, well, they would be going to the hospital 4 hours later for relief, if you know what I mean. And just in case everything else fails, I also brought the vacuum pump, which is supposed to work no matter what. Now, keep in mind that when we first laid down together on that incredible bed, it had been over 12 years since experiencing sex with anyone. To say I was excited, well, that's the world's greatest understatement. The only problem was, my excitement failed to show where it counted most. After 30 minutes of foreplay, it was clear the Cialis wasn't working. So we brought out the big guns, a substantial dose of Muse. But after another 20 minutes or so of wonderfully delicious fondling and caressing, nothing, nada, zip. By this time, little beads of sweat started forming on my brow. Still being the ever-optimistic one, I said to her, "Sweetie, no problem. I brought the fail-safe, the vacuum pump, which has to work because it's based on physics." Which was said with a bit of bravado, more to mask my growing anxiety than provide hope or encouragement to my rapidly deteriorating chances of enjoying intercourse. As I sat on the bed and started pumping for all I'm worth, she laid there looking absolutely beautiful with a look on her face that essentially said, "Do we really have to go through all this every time we make love?" Well, after a minute or so of pumping, I'm starting to see results. Yes! Thank God! Finally! That is, until I inadvertently sucked in my left testicle, at which point I doubled over in excruciating pain. By this time, sweat is pouring down my face, and my darkest fears seemed to come true as I thought, it's over. It's over before it even got started. However, it was at that very moment of my deepest despair that something extraordinary happened. I finally accepted the isness of my condition and simply stopped fighting it. I became very quiet, turned around and looked into her big, gorgeous eyes and said, "I'm done. I'm done with all of this. Let's just lay together and see what happens." And what happened was we made love for hours. And that's while being completely flaccid and not using any toys or other aids. Then the next morning we woke up to make love for hours again until it was time to head back home. What we experienced was so profound that it is now the subject of countless media interviews, speeches, and a TEDx talk. Here's what I discovered through this whole process. Accepting what is equivalent to surrendering to the possibility of transformation. Once I stopped fighting and resisting what was, I was open to worlds of experience and insights I had no idea even existed. In the context of what I just shared with you, it should now be clear that my acceptance and surrender was anything but a sign of weakness. Without it, I would have remained a very frustrated, angry man, wondering how fate could have been so cruel. Through my surrender, I now have an intimate life that is beyond our wildest dreams. There's a strong cultural imprint that we must do whatever it takes to achieve a certain end, and anything short of that is a failure, defeat. I'm hoping you now see that this is not necessarily true. The best things in life are not those we, quote-unquote, make happen, but those that we allow to show up because we simply got out of the way.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Extraordinary Intimacy with Michael J. Russer. For all speaking, media interviews, and workshop inquiries, go to michaelrusserlive.com. For private intimacy coaching, send an email to coaching@michaelrusserlive.com.